Hello and welcome back to Get Fit Guy. This is Kevin Dunn. Now, most exercises that form staple workout routines in the gym are what we call bilateral. You've probably done plenty of bilateral training without even knowing it or thinking about it, but what I want to ask today is, are bilateral exercises the best pick for your individual goals? To help you better understand these exercises in this episode, I'll cover what bilateral exercises are, their benefits, potential drawbacks, a sample exercise day, and a sample training session. Now, bilateral exercise is an exercise where both extremities are performing the same movement pattern. An example of a bilateral pattern in the lower body is a squat, where your hips, knees, and ankles are all flexing and then extending symmetrically at the same time. And the benefits of bilateral exercises are, first of all, it's the best way to develop absolute strength because more muscles are used in the movement. Balance isn't a limitation, so you can funnel more intensity into lifting heavier weights. Secondly, it's a great way to develop motor control in the bending and squatting patterns because engaging both extremities at once helps you to handle more time under tension, which is what we need to create motor control because, again, balance is not a limitation as it is in unilateral or single-sided variations of these patterns. And thirdly, it's the best way to develop muscular endurance and strength endurance. Muscular endurance is the foundation for all other contractions. Muscular endurance activities are typically higher reps, lower intensity we define as load, and have higher time under tension. The limitation for muscular endurance training is motor control, as muscular endurance is extended out over time, and that's where motor control begins to break down. Strength endurance is similar to muscular endurance, however, is done at higher tension than muscular endurance. So now your limitation is more the ability to overcome the external load than the motor control. Strength endurance activities are lower reps, higher intensity or higher load, and lower time under tension. What about potential drawbacks to bilateral movements? Well, humans naturally find the most efficient way to move through their environment. And one of the drawbacks of bilateral training is that you develop compensatory movement patterns if one of your limbs is weaker than the other, or some movement asymmetries exist. In this case, unilateral training would be a great way to fix any imbalances that appear during bilateral training rather than just sticking with the bilateral training itself. However, it's very rare that you go to the gym and see people doing something like a single arm dumbbell bench press. Most people are just doing the bench press, right? And when you see it begin to get a bit heavy, you notice that one side of the barbell is rising before the other side of the barbell. So this would show a unilateral strength imbalance that could only really be fixed by going to something like dumbbells. So the difference between unilateral and bilateral exercises is the number of limbs that you're using in that exercise. In a unilateral exercise, only one side is performing the movement, such as a single arm bench press, a single arm bicep curl. Both extremities in the same movement pattern is a bilateral exercise, such as a barbell bench press or barbell bicep curl. And some examples of bilateral exercises would be the goblet squat, which is where you start performing the squat with your hips as wide as your shoulders and the weight held in front in what we call the goblet position. If you can imagine holding a goblet or a big cup with both hands in front of your chest, and then you hinge at the hips and squat down. Drive with your glutes and return to the standing position. That's one rep. Bench press would be, I'm talking about barbell bench press for bilateral movement, is an upper body horizontal pushing movement. You're going to start lying supine, which is where you're facing upwards to the sky on the bench, your feet flat on the ground. Or basically, if you listen to an old episode of mine on bench press, it's you want to have your feet as close to your hips whilst keeping your feet flat on the ground. You want to unrack the barbell, lower it to the base of your chest or your sternum, and then push it away until the arms are locked out. One rep. Another exercise that might be bilateral would be something like a cable overhead press with handles. The reason why I'm saying this is I just want to introduce different movements to you guys. So you would start this with the handles with the cable ends in the middle position, grab a handle in each hand, lock them out in front of you, and then slowly press over your head until your arms are locked out. Deadlift, stand with your foot width apart, or basically where you would be if I said jump as high as you can in the air. Wherever you would set your feet to make your highest standing vertical jump is where your feet should be to do the deadlift, because that's where you're going to create the most what we call ground reaction force. Your shins will be a couple of inches away from the barbell, and then you're going to hinge at the hip, slide your arms down outside your legs, grab a hold of the barbell, and then lower your hips until your shins are making contact. Drive with the glutes, stand up, and then return back to the floor. That's 1 rep. A sample training session I'm going to put in here. I don't normally do this because I don't believe in general prescriptions. And I just want to make a note that if you do want to get this written down, it will be in the show notes, which you can access on your podcast app. So sample training session, we got A1, A2. So A1 is usually where we got our main strength exercise, and then a B1, B2, that'll be our accessory. So A1 is going to be a superset with A2. So A1 is going to be dumbbell bench press at 2-1-2-1. If you don't know what that means, it's the tempo. I've covered this in some old episodes. 8 to 10 reps, 3 sets, rest 90 seconds, and then move on to the deadlift, again at 2-1-2-1. And we're looking at 8 to 10 reps for 3 sets, rest 90 seconds. Move on to our B, which is our accessory work, seated cable row at 3-1-3-1, 8 to 10 reps for 3 sets with a 90-second rest, and a back squat to the box at 2-1-2-1, 8 to 10 reps, 3 sets for 90 seconds rest between. Now, how to choose exercises is important as well, right? Because there are thousands of exercises to choose from. If you just Google leg exercises, you'll be overwhelmed by all the options. So how do you select? Now, again, I have an old episode. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's probably just called exercise selection, and you'll get the criteria in there. But basically, what you want to do is, first of all, learn the 6 movement patterns. So we've got core engagement, squat, lunge, bend, push, and pull. And then learn how each of the exercises you can do fit within those patterns. Because if we're looking at something like a leg day, you're not going to put an upper pull in there. So you're going to learn, okay, squat, that goes under squat pattern. Okay, but what about walking on an incline treadmill? Where does that go? Well, that goes under lunge because it's a unilateral hip split with mostly knee flexion, right? And then we're looking at dumbbell bench press, the strict press, seated Arnold press, anything like that would go under push. So you got to learn where all the exercises fit and then develop a pattern of training based upon your goals. If you're looking for general training, you want to hit all of those movement patterns. If you're looking for some kind of sport-specific outcome, then you'd be looking for something different. So something like, for example, I do martial arts, as you guys know. So karate, we're going to be looking a lot at things with knee extension, right? Because it's predominantly a kicking sport, and kicking is knee extension. Of course, we've got knee flexion where I'm returning my foot back towards my body, but during that phase there, I'm not really looking for a huge amount of power because I'm not striking anybody. I'm striking with the knee extension. So heavy squats are really good. Leg extensions are really good. Weighted step-ups are good. Lunges are good. Any of that stuff. So learn what you need to do within the patterns in order to satisfy your own goal. And remember that as a novice trainee, it might be that just training that pattern 1 time a week is enough to get a dose response. But more experienced trainees will need a higher dose because just like any kind of intervention, you begin to adapt to it. So the longer you've been doing something, the bigger the dose you'll need in order to get the same response. Simple. Okay, now on to a listener email from Pat. All right, Pat, first of all, I want to say really sorry to you because you actually emailed me in July and I'm only getting to it now. I also thought your email was hugely entertaining, but I'm only going to read out the questions and not the main body of the email. So question 1 is Pat Davidson, PhD, Director of Training Methodology at Peak Performance, a private fitness studio in New York, claims that a workout needs just 5 exercises. Push, which is pressing away from you. Pull, which is tugging something towards you. Hip hinge, bending from the middle. Squat, flexing at the knee. And plank, stabilizing your core. Consequently, a program that only contained, say, bench press, pull-up, deadlift, squat, and plank, or exercises seen as good alternatives to those, would be all you needed. No need for further complication. Just more heavy things in those exercises in good form at regular intervals with ever-increasing loads, and that's it. Can this be true? Does Dr. Davidson oversimplify strength training, or is everyone making it more complicated? All right, so first of all, I would argue for there being 6 patterns of movement rather than 5. For me, Dr. Davidson's missing out on the pattern I'm calling lunge, but some other people refer to it as the gait pattern, which is, like your walking gait. Squats can't cover that pattern since they're bilateral, and running, walking, and lunging are all unilateral. Is he oversimplifying strength training? Yes, but that's because he's been value captured, which seems to be becoming my new thing. If you listen to my episode from 2 weeks ago, anything where we remove the texture and nuance of individuality and replace it with simplicity is a value capture. So whilst I agree that there are a limited number of patterns and a limited number of impactful ways to train them within the gym environment, it's still a gross oversimplification. But it's also contextual, right? Like, I've just given some training recommendations in this podcast myself, but it's a 10-minute podcast. I've never met any of the listeners, so we need some context here that it needs to be general. But anyone claiming to have a methodology is definitely just broadcasting and cannot possibly ever have nuance. All right, question 2 that you asked, is it worth my time to learn the Turkish Getup? What are its actual strength and fitness benefits? The internet says if I learn the Turkish Getup, I will look like Thor, attract women half my age, and stand a much better chance of remaining chaste should I ever be incarcerated. What are your thoughts? My thoughts are yes, learn the Turkish Getup. If you have any questions or just want to say hi, email me at getfitguy@quickanddirtytips.com. Get Fit Guy is a quickanddirtytips.com podcast, thanks to the team at Quick and Dirty Tips, Morgan Christensen, Holly Hutchins, Director of Podcasts, Brandon Getchus, Davina Tomlin, and me, Kevin. If you have a question, voicemail me, 510-353-3104. Email me, getfitguy@quickanddirtytips.com. For the show notes, check out your podcast app or visit quickanddirtytips.com for more info. Bye-bye.